A few days before the Grand Iredale tournament, the castle of Iredale stood darker than ever beneath the cold skies of Taginia. The banners of King Gregory waved from the towers, and the sound of chains, hammers, and frightened whispers echoed through the halls. While the rest of Taginia prepared for celebration and competition, Gregory continued his life exactly the way he always had, through fear, power, gold, and control. Every morning, Gregory marched through the prison corridors beneath the castle with that same twisted grin stretched across his face. His heavy armored boots thundered across the stone floors while prisoners shrank against the bars of their cages. Some had once been soldiers from Selsmire village, others were rebels from Royswood, thieves from Weewood, or men who simply spoke against him at the wrong time. Gregory loved seeing fear in their eyes. He grabbed weak prisoners by the face and mocked them while his knights laughed behind him. He called them slime, insects, failures. Some prisoners were locked in tiny iron cages, barely large enough to kneel in. Others were chained deep in the dungeons where sunlight never reached. And the unlucky ones were fed to the crocodiles. Beneath the throne room moat, the crocodiles were always nearby. Gregory treated them almost like royal guards. Massive reptiles rested beside his throne, with their yellow eyes half open, watching every movement inside the chamber. Visitors to Iredale quickly learned one thing: the crocodiles ate whatever Gregory no longer needed. Yet, despite all the terror, Gregory's greatest love was not war, it was gold. Mountains of it filled the treasury halls beneath Iredale Castle. Gold coins spilled from barrels and treasure chests. Golden goblets lined the tables. Jewelry, crowns, weapons, statues. Gregory had taken riches from nearly every land in Taginia. Taxes, war payments, forced tributes, bribes, protection money. It all ended up in Iredale, and Gregory adored every second of it. Some nights he sat calmly on his throne, smoking from his long pipe, breathing smoke into the air while staring proudly at his fortune. Other nights, he threw himself directly into the piles of gold coins like a child, jumping into water, laughing wildly as coins scattered across the stone floor. "Gold is all mine," he shouted through the treasury chambers while his laughter echoed endlessly. No king in Taginia possessed wealth close to Gregory's. That was exactly how he wanted it, because gold meant loyalty. Gold bought soldiers. Gold bought silence. Gold bought alliances. Gold bought survival. Towns stayed dependent on him because Gregory made sure they stayed poor while Iredale stayed rich. If a mayor obeyed him, they received supplies and protection. If they betrayed him, Gregory could starve their people with a single command. And Gregory never stopped working. Even while preparing for the tournament, he walked the streets of Iredale inspecting workers personally. Builders repairing walls, blacksmiths forging armor, servants carrying supplies. Gregory watched them all. If he saw someone slowing down, he screamed at them publicly. Sometimes he shoved them to the ground. Sometimes he kicked over equipment just to terrify everyone nearby. Get back to work. Nobody argued. Nobody dared. Because despite the smiling face and laughing voice, Gregory was one of the most serious and dangerous rulers Taginia had ever seen. Every smile hid calculation. Every joke hid intimidation. Gregory was always thinking ahead, always planning, and that was exactly why he gathered his knights, days later, inside the halls of Iredale Castle, to explain the true purpose behind the tournament. The armored soldiers stood silently while Gregory addressed them from the throne. "My knights, I hope you all understand why I am holding this fighting tournament." The room stayed quiet. Gregory's grin widened. Recruit. One single word. That was the heart of it all. Gregory knew wars never truly ended. Peace in Taginia was temporary. Another rebellion would come eventually. Another kingdom would rise. Another army would attempt to challenge Iredale. So, Gregory wanted stronger fighters, stronger than before, stronger than his enemies, maybe even stronger than his current knights. I need better fighters, he told them while staring across the chamber, to become stronger than we are. Some knights exchanged uneasy glances. Gregory's words carried a hidden meaning. If the king desired stronger warriors, what happened to the old ones once they were no longer useful? Gregory simply smiled. He already knew exactly what he was doing. Officially, the tournament celebrated Iridel's victory and unity across Teginia. Crowds would gather, markets would thrive, fighters from every land would compete for glory, gold, and the prized land of Lexington. But Gregory's real eyes were focused elsewhere. He was studying potential recruits, warriors, killers, champions, survivors, men and women powerful enough to strengthen his grip over Teginia even further. And of course, Gregory still wanted Knowles to win the entire tournament. If Knowles claimed victory, Gregory practically won everything himself. The gold remained close to Iredale. Lexington would fall under Gregory's influence, and Knowles, Gregory's most feared fighter and closest weapon, would stand as the symbol of Iredale's supremacy. But Gregory was too smart to rely on only one outcome. Even if Knowles won, Gregory could still recruit the strongest fighters along the way, because King Gregory always had another plan hidden beneath the one everyone else could see. The halls of Iredale Castle echoed with the heavy clang of armor as King Gregory marched through the stone corridors with that same confident grin stretched across his face. Gold shimmered from every inch of his armor, while torches painted the castle walls in deep orange light. Gregory was waiting for someone important. Not a prisoner, not a messenger, a king. King Casos of Piskville. In all of Teginia, there were few rulers Gregory truly valued. Most kings were tools, shields, or future enemies. But Piskville was different. Piskville was old, older than many of the lands surrounding it. Its soldiers had survived countless wars. Its monkey armies were disciplined, brutal, and loyal to their king. And King Casos himself had earned respect across Teginia as a battle-tested ruler who had stood through bloodshed for decades. Gregory understood something many rulers did not. Power alone was dangerous. But alliances built empires, and by securing Piskville beside Iredell, Gregory had tightened his grip across Teginia stronger than ever before. The old king finally arrived within the castle walls, leaning on his cane while his purple robes dragged across the floor. Age had bent his back, but not his mind. Casos studied Gregory carefully while the ruler of Iredell approached with that wide, eager smile. "I have an invite for your fighter." Casos narrowed his eyes immediately. "Fight for what?" Gregory could already tell the old king was hesitant. Casos had fought enough wars in his life, enough death, enough blood spilled for kingdoms. The thought of another spectacle probably sounded foolish to him. But Gregory knew exactly how to persuade men. "Don't you want the gold and land?" That sentence lingered in the air like bait on a hook. Then Gregory delivered the true temptation. Lexington, the prize land sitting near Piskville itself. Gregory explained that the tournament champion would gain enormous wealth and rights to Lexington's territory. Casos understood immediately what that meant. Expansion, security, influence, more farmland, more protection for Piskville's future. The old king slowly nodded. More land would do. And just like that, Gregory had him. The two kings shook hands beneath the towering walls of Iredale. One king, smiling like a predator, the other already calculating the future in his mind. Casos could not compete in the tournament himself anymore. Age had robbed him of that strength long ago, but he knew somebody who could fight in his name, a fighter worthy of Piskville, a warrior who could win. Seisos took the invitation and departed back toward his kingdom to prepare. But while the old king traveled home, Gregory remained inside Iredell, making preparations of his own. The tournament excited him greatly, but it also made him nervous. Too many dangerous people would be entering Taginia, too many grudges, too many enemies. Gregory marched through the castle halls, speaking directly to his guards. "I need good protection for this tournament." His armored footsteps thundered through the corridors as soldiers listened carefully. "Watch my back during the show." Gregory explained that fighters from all over Taginia would soon arrive. Warriors from rival lands, men hungry for gold, men hungry for revenge, men who may still despise Iredell after the Great War. "They win lots of this," Gregory said, while holding up piles of gold before the guards. The soldiers stared wide-eyed at the treasure. "Dangerous fighters are coming. Everyone must have high awareness." Soon, the entire castle buzzed with preparation. Guards spread word from hallway to hallway. Spears were sharpened. Patrols increased around the castle walls. Gregory wanted eyes everywhere during the tournament. He trusted few people completely, and deep down, he knew power always attracted betrayal. Meanwhile, far away in Piskville, King Seisos returned home beneath grey skies and towering stone walls, and despite the agreement he made with Gregory, something inside him felt heavy. The old king walked slowly through the streets of Piskville, watching the people carefully. Some merchants were thriving, some soldiers proudly marched through town. Piskville remained prosperous compared to many lands after the war. But not everybody had recovered. Not everybody survived the cost of defending Iredell. Seisos saw wounded veterans begging for food, families struggling to rebuild their lives, poor citizens forgotten after the war ended. The scars of battle still lived in the streets, no matter how much Gregory celebrated victory. The past war was costly, Seisos admitted quietly, and for the first time in a while, the old king questioned whether Gregory's rewards had truly been enough. Yes, Gregory had given him gold. Yes, Gregory had strengthened Piskville. But many of Seisos' people had bled for Iredell Castle. Many never recovered. Unlike Gregory, Seisos still carried guilt in his heart. He believed a king was meant to provide for his people. A ruler should never allow his citizens to starve while he sat comfortably in a castle. So, Seisos personally walked through town, giving bread to the homeless, handing out silver coins, offering gold to struggling families. Guards silently followed behind him as he tried to repair wounds the war had left behind. In Piskville, kings were expected to protect everyone. Nobody suffers in Piskville. Nobody should be forgotten. But deep down, Seisos knew he was failing that promise, little by little. Because the longer he remained tied to Gregory, the more Gregory's influence infected him. Gold, power, expansion, control. The very things Gregory worshipped were slowly wrapping around the old king like chains he could no longer see. Speech by King Seisos. My people of Piskville, gather close and hear the words of your king. Many outsiders look upon our walls and see only stone. They see towers, soldiers, markets, and armor. But they do not understand what truly keeps Piskville standing. It is not our gates. It is not our weapons. It is not even our armies. It is our people. Piskville is one of the oldest towns in all of Taginia. Before many kingdoms had banners, before many kings ever touched a throne, our people were already building homes here, raising families here, and defending this land with their lives. Generations lived and died upon this soil so future generations could survive another day. That is why this kingdom matters. That is why this crown matters. A ruler is not meant to sit comfortably while his people starve in the streets. A king is not measured by how much gold rests inside his castle vaults. He is measured by the condition of his people, by the strength of their homes, by the fullness of their stomachs, by whether the weak are protected and the forgotten are remembered. A prosperous kingdom means nothing if its people are suffering in silence. I have walked these streets myself. I have seen the wounded soldiers from the Great War. I have seen families struggling to recover. I have seen good men return from battle only to discover their lives changed forever. Some carry scars upon their skin. Others carry scars within their hearts. And I ask myself every night, have I truly done enough for them? Because the burden of leadership does not disappear once the battle ends. In many ways, that is when the true responsibility begins. In Piskville, kings are not chosen by crowds. They are born into duty. Only a Xesos may rule this kingdom. That law has existed longer than most kingdoms across Taginia have even existed. The Xesos bloodline has protected this land through war after war after war. Fathers passed this responsibility to sons. Sons carried the legacy of their fathers. Every ruler before me swore the same oath: protect the people, preserve the kingdom, honor the bloodline. That is the promise of a Xesos, and blood alone does not make somebody worthy of this crown. Blood gives us obligation. It gives us responsibility. If a Xesos king grows selfish, weak, greedy, or blind to the suffering of his people, then he dishonors every ruler who came before him. The legacy becomes poisoned. I refuse to allow that to happen. Piskville must remain strong, not because we desire power over others, but because strength allows us to protect our own. We must continue building, continue feeding our people, continue supporting our workers, our soldiers, our families, and our elderly. No citizen should feel abandoned beneath these walls, not while a Xesos still breathes. There will always be wars, always kings demanding alliances, always men promising gold, land, and glory. But long after the banners fall and the battles are forgotten, the people remain, and they look to their king. They look to us for guidance. So hear me now, people of Piskville. The Xesos bloodline will not abandon its duty. We will keep our promises. We will honor our legacy. And as long as this crown rests upon my head, I will continue fighting, not for power, not for riches, but for the future of Piskville and every soul who calls this kingdom home. Meanwhile, in Wywood, the sun barely reached the streets of Wywood. Even during the day, the city looked trapped beneath a shadow, its alleyways drowned in smoke, broken lantern light, and whispers that never stopped. People hurried through the streets, with their heads down, hiding coins beneath their coats and locking their doors before the sky turned black. In Wywood, survival mattered more than honor, and above all of it sat the criminal council. Not kings, not mayors, not heroes. Criminals. Deep inside an abandoned castle on the edge of the city, the council gathered around an old wooden table, scarred with knife marks and burn stains. Nobody knew all of their real names. Some hid their faces. Some spoke only when necessary. Others let silence do the threatening for them. Yet, somehow, despite the chaos outside, they kept Wywood standing. Barely. Every gang in the city answered to them in one way or another. The gambling houses, the thieves in the marketplaces, the smugglers moving goods through the tunnels beneath the streets, even the armed crews watching the docks paid tribute to the council. Other towns across Taginia considered them the rulers of Wywood simply because nobody else could survive there long enough to claim the title. But ruling Wywood was different from ruling anywhere else. You could not govern it with laws, you could not scare it with armies, and you certainly could not tame it with promises. Wywood broke everything eventually. The city itself felt alive, violent, suspicious, rebellious. Buildings leaned like crooked teeth over narrow streets, while criminals gathered outside casinos and underground taverns, trading stolen gold and information. Somewhere in the darkness, people vanished every night. Some blamed gangs, others blamed monsters hiding in the ruins beyond the walls. Nobody asked questions for long, Then came the invitations from Iredell. 2 messengers had arrived days earlier, carrying sealed tournament invitations stamped with King Gregory's crest, an invitation to fight in the grand tournament at Taginia's Colosseum. Gold, glory, land, power. The council laughed the moment they saw them. One of the members tossed the paper across the table like garbage. "King Gregory," one scoffed, "that freak thinks he can buy everybody." Another member leaned back in his chair, staring at the firelight. "Never trust a king that throws his own fighters in prison." The room agreed immediately. They had heard the stories, Gregory's dungeons, his cages, his crocodiles, his endless greed. Wywood respected power, but it despised control. And Gregory wanted control over everything. That alone made him an enemy. One of the council members picked up the invitation again, staring at the gold seal before crumpling it in his fist. "We ain't fighting for him." Another pointed toward the trash bin. "Throw it out." The invitation landed in the garbage beside broken bottles and cigarette ash. Just like that. No debate, no hesitation, no fear. King Gregory believed all of Taginia bent the knee eventually. He believed every town desired his gold, his tournament, his approval. But Wywood was different. It did not kneel. It did not obey. And it certainly did not fight for kings. The criminal council had no alliances. Not with Gregory. Not with Iredell. Not with anyone. Yet, despite all their crimes, betrayals, and corruption, they possessed one thing rare in Taginia: loyalty to each other. In a city built on theft and deception, that loyalty was the only reason Wywood had not collapsed completely into madness. Far away in Iredell, King Gregory continued preparing his tournament, unaware that his invitation now sat buried beneath trash inside the darkest city in Taginia. And if he ever discovered the disrespect, Wywood would not apologize. Outside the towering walls of Iredell Castle, the spirit of rebellion had begun to breathe again. The streets of Taginia, once loud only with merchants, wagon wheels, and the commands of armored knights, now echoed with a different sound. The voice of Henry. An old man, wrapped in blue robes, stood before the crowds, with fire still burning in his soul. His fist rose high above the people as he shouted against King Gregory's rule. Around him, nervous citizens held signs demanding freedom, lower taxes, and an end to oppression. Some whispered the words quietly. Others yelled them with anger they had buried for years. But all eyes kept drifting toward the castle in the distance, looming like a shadow over the city. Henry had become more than a protester. He had become a symbol. Day after day, he walked through the city of Taginia, carrying scrolls, handwritten documents, and flyers filled with accusations against King Gregory, stories of stolen gold, prisoners thrown into dungeons, workers beaten in the streets, towns manipulated through fear and bribery. Henry spread every story he could gather, refusing to let the people forget what Gregory truly was. And the people listened, not openly, not boldly, but quietly, behind closed doors, inside crowded taverns, in alleyways and market stands. The fear of King Gregory still ruled the city, but Henry's words had begun infecting the minds of the people like sparks drifting through dry grass. "The tournament is a lie," Henry shouted as crowds gathered around him. "A celebration of power, a distraction while Gregory tightens his grip around Taginia." He warned the people not to support it. "Do not buy the tickets. Do not cheer for him. Do not feed his gold." Many lowered their heads as he spoke, terrified the wrong person might hear them agreeing. Because the Iredell Knights already had. In the crowded streets, silver armor glimmered beneath the sunlight, Knights stood silently near the crowds pretending to observe the city, but their attention remained fixed on Henry. Every movement, every speech, every face that stopped to listen. They carried notebooks now. They wrote names, descriptions, locations. The rebellion was being measured, and Henry knew it. Yet he refused to kneel, as one knight stood watching him from only a few feet away. Henry slowly raised his feathered pen into the air. The crowd went silent. Even the market noise seemed to fade beneath the tension. Then Henry tossed the feather upward toward the sky. "Spread the spirit of freedom," he declared. As the feather drifted over the heads of the people, while the knight stared at him in silence. Some citizens looked terrified. Others looked inspired. But the knights only smirked. That smile was worse than anger, because it meant they were patient. King Gregory would not allow this resistance to continue forever. The longer Henry gathered followers, the more dangerous he became. The old man was no longer just shouting in the streets. He was planting doubt inside Taginia itself, and doubt was the one thing tyrants feared most.
People of Taginia, hear me now. Freedom is not something King Gregory can buy with gold, nor crush beneath his throne. Freedom lives inside the hearts of those brave enough to defend it. For too long, we have lived in fear. Too long, we have bowed our heads while corruption spreads across our lands. But courage is stronger than fear. Stand for your families, stand for your towns, stand for what matters. Do not let a tyrant decide the fate of your spirit. A kingdom without freedom is nothing more than a prison, with banners hanging from the walls. So I say to you now, have courage, resist the lies, resist the fear, resist the tyrant known as King Gregory, and let the people of Taginia be free once more.
In the dark and lawless streets of Weirwood, where thieves vanish into alleyways and gangs rule beneath flickering lantern light, one figure walks without fear. Bramble, a towering beast built like a nightmare from two savage worlds. The crushing strength of a gorilla, fused with the snarling face of a warhorse, muscles stretched across his massive frame like stone carved by rage itself. Every step he takes through Weirwood sounds heavy enough to shake the wooden roads beneath him. And then there are the eyes, red, burning, like hot coals, glowing in the dark. Most people move out of his way the second they see him coming. Tavern doors go quiet. Gamblers lower their voices. Even criminals think twice before provoking him. In Weirwood, fear is respected more than kindness, and Bramble carries enough fear around him to silence entire streets. But Bramble is not some mindless villain. He does not rob innocent people. He does not terrorize towns for pleasure. He simply refuses to be controlled. That is why Weirwood suits him perfectly. Weirwood is a city without kings, a sinful maze drenched in gold, smuggling, gambling, crime, and whispered deals made in darkness. Nobody truly owns the city. Not even King Gregory dares to tighten his grip too hard around Weirwood. The place fights back against authority like a wounded animal, and Bramble fits right into that rebellion. The criminals of Weirwood know better than to take advantage of him. Bramble walks where he pleases, says what he wants, and answers to nobody. He lives among cutthroats because none of them are foolish enough to challenge him directly, especially when they see the brass knuckles wrapped around his enormous fists. Heavy, golden, scarred from countless fights. His fists are already massive enough to crush bone, but the brass makes every punch devastating. One strike from Bramble can send a grown warrior flying across a room. Tavern brawls usually end the second he stands up from his chair. Some say Bramble once knocked a man through a wooden wall for trying to cheat him in a card game. Others say he fought 3 armed smugglers alone in the middle of the street and left dents in their armor with his bare hands. Nobody knows which stories are true anymore. Because in Wye Wood, legends grow fast in the dark. Still, beneath the fiery eyes and monstrous appearance, Bramble follows his own strange code. He respects strength, he hates cowards, and while he may look like a beast ready to tear someone apart, he only becomes dangerous when pushed too far. And in a city like Wye Wood, someone is always foolish enough to push. The streets of Wye Wood were unusually quiet. Too quiet. Normally, the crooked city breathed with chaos. Gamblers yelling from taverns, smugglers arguing in alleyways, thieves sprinting across rooftops, and drunken criminals stumbling through the streets at all hours of the night. But today, the roads felt hollow. Empty bottles rolled through the wind, garbage sat abandoned in the gutters. A broken cart leaned sideways near a pawn shop, while distant shutters slammed shut somewhere deeper in town. Bramble walked alone through it all. His massive footsteps echoed against the cracked stone roads as his glowing red eyes scanned the city. The brass knuckles wrapped around his fists clinked softly with each swing of his arms. He could feel it immediately. Something had happened earlier. Maybe a gang fight, maybe the criminal council sent men through the streets, maybe somebody got killed. In Wye Wood, people disappeared all the time, but Bramble did not care enough to investigate. Trouble was normal here. He was simply bored and looking for something to do before the day wasted away. He began making his way toward a nearby cafe when suddenly something fluttered across the street, a piece of paper. The wind carried it wildly through the alleyways, tossing it through the air like a drifting leaf. Bramble narrowed his fiery eyes and watched it spin toward him. Then, with quick reflexes, for someone so enormous, he snatched it right out of the air. The paper crinkled in his massive hand. He looked down at it. Tournament at the Castle of Iredale. Bramble stared silently for a moment. An invite, a real one. Suddenly he understood. The criminal council threw the tournament invitations into the garbage without caring the day before. The fools probably never imagined one would escape the dumpster and end up drifting through Wye Wood itself. But now it had landed in Bramble's hands. Right place, right time. He had heard rumors about King Gregory's grand tournament for weeks now. Fighters from all across Taginia gathering at Iredale. Crowds, gold, glory, violence, power. The strongest warriors in the land, proving themselves before kings and armies. Bramble never thought he would actually have a chance to enter, but King Gregory had made one thing clear. Any official invite brought to Iredale would be honored, and nobody had claimed this one. A slow grin crept across Bramble's monstrous face. Now this sounded entertaining. Bramble did not care about becoming a ruler. The grand prize land meant absolutely nothing to him. Leadership sounded exhausting. Sitting on thrones and managing people was not his style. But the gold, that interested him. Gold meant freedom. Food, drinks, entertainment. Anything he wanted. And if he somehow won the land of Lexington, he would simply sell it to the highest bidder and take the riches for himself. Simple. Without another word, Bramble folded the invite carefully and tucked it away. Then the massive beast turned around and began heading back toward his home in Wye Wood. He needed to prepare weapons, armor, supplies, because he planned on leaving for Iredale as soon as possible. The tournament was calling him. And thanks to one careless decision by the criminal council, Bramble had now become the 5th fighter officially heading to the Iredale tournament. The moment Bramble returned home with the tournament invitation clenched in his massive hand, his mind was already made up. There would be no hesitation, no second thoughts, no fear. The beast of Wye Wood was going to Iredale. And in Bramble's mind, there was only one possible outcome. Victory. Inside an old abandoned training hall on the edge of Wywood, Bramble immediately began preparing himself for the brutal battles ahead. Dust shook from the ceiling as the massive creature paced back and forth, his fiery red eyes glowing with excitement. "I win every fight!" he roared proudly to the empty room. To Bramble, the tournament already felt personal. He believed no warrior in Taginia could truly stand against him. Knights, mercenaries, champions from distant lands. None of it mattered. His size alone terrified most opponents before a fight even started. But Bramble did not want to simply win. He wanted domination. So he trained harder than ever. With a furious growl, he drove his brass-covered fist directly into a stone wall. Smash! Chunks of rock exploded across the room. The entire wall cracked beneath the impact. Bramble grinned wider. Again he struck. Pow! More stone shattered apart, while dust filled the air around him. Every punch echoed through the abandoned building like thunder. His brass knuckles tore into the walls over and over as he practiced his speed, power, and precision. "My punches are lightning fast," he barked proudly. And honestly, he might not have been wrong. For someone so enormous, Bramble moved frighteningly fast when he attacked, his fists blurred forward with explosive force, capable of breaking armor, bone, and stone alike. The brass knuckles only made the damage even worse. Still, smashing walls was not enough. Bramble continued training for hours. He lifted massive weights until the metal bars bent slightly in his grip. Muscles bulged across his monstrous body as he pushed himself harder and harder. Sweat dripped from his arms while he imagined the fighters waiting for him at Iredell Castle. Somewhere deep in his mind, one thought repeated over and over: King Gregory has no idea what's coming. Most of the tournament fighters were expected, invited, prepared for. But Bramble? He was an accident, a forgotten invitation, drifting through the streets of Wywood by pure chance. And now, one of the most dangerous fighters in Taginia was heading straight toward Gregory's grand event. By the time the training ended, Bramble's excitement had only grown stronger. He packed what little he needed, tightened the brass around his fists, and left Wywood behind without looking back. Soon, the city disappeared behind him as forests and muddy roads stretched ahead toward distant Iredell. "The castle is far from here," Bramble muttered with a grin. But distance did not matter. Not when there was gold waiting at the end, not when there were fighters to crush. As Bramble marched through rivers and forests toward Iredell Castle, one thing became very clear. The tournament was about to become far more dangerous than King Gregory ever expected. As the sun drifted lower across Taginia, Bramble continued his long march toward Iredell Castle. The journey from Wywood was not a simple one. He had crossed muddy roads through Braden, marched past the tense streets of Ramor, wandered near the hollow remains of Amron, and pushed through thick forests without stopping for long. But Bramble was no ordinary traveler. He was a horse beast built for endurance. His enormous legs carried him across the lands with frightening speed, splashing through rivers and crushing branches beneath his heavy boots. Villagers who spotted him along the roads quickly moved aside, whispering nervously after he passed. By nightfall, the towering walls of Iredell finally came into view. Bramble slowed his pace. His glowing red eyes narrowed at the sight of King Gregory's fortress. "King Gregory is no good," he muttered beneath his breath. He already distrusted the king. A ruler surrounded by gold, crocodiles, and fear could never truly be honorable in Bramble's eyes. He expected trouble the moment he arrived near the castle, and trouble arrived fast. The water near the castle walls suddenly rippled violently. Then came the eyes, yellow, hungry. Crocodiles, massive reptiles, emerged from the dark waters, surrounding Bramble from every direction. Their jaws snapped open as they lunged toward him, splashing through the river with terrifying speed. Most travelers would have panicked. Bramble grinned. "Smash time!" One crocodile launched toward him, but Bramble caught it by the jaw with one massive hand. The beast thrashed wildly as Bramble drove his brass-covered fist directly into its skull. Crack! The crocodile spun backward into the water. Another snapped at his shoulder. Bramble grabbed it around the throat and shoved it beneath the surface, while two more rushed him from behind. Water exploded everywhere as Bramble swung wildly through the river, smashing crocodiles back into the current with devastating punches. His brass knuckles crashed against scales and teeth over and over. One crocodile tried clamping onto his arm, but Bramble hammered it directly between the eyes until it released him. Another got choked nearly unconscious before splashing away into the darkness. Soon the river became chaos, snapping jaws, splashing water, flying scales, and Bramble standing in the center of it all like a monster unleashed. Finally, the surviving crocodiles retreated back into the water, deciding this creature was far too dangerous to drag beneath the surface. Bramble snorted confidently and continued walking toward the castle gates like nothing had happened. The guards, standing outside, froze the moment they saw him approaching from the darkness, dripping wet from crocodile water. Bramble marched directly to them and held up the invitation. "I'm here to win." The guards exchanged nervous looks. The beast was terrifying enough already, but now he smelled like river water and violence. Still, rules were rules. One guard cleared his throat carefully. "Fighters must provide 2 silver coins for lodging inside the castle grounds." Bramble blinked. Silver? He had none. Bramble carried no money at all. His expression slowly darkened. The guards stiffened immediately as the massive horse beast leaned closer, his fiery red eyes glowing beneath the torchlight. "You telling me I sleep outside?" The guards swallowed hard, but stood firm. No silver, no room. For a moment, the tension became dangerous. Bramble shoved one guard backward and pointed aggressively at the swords hanging from their waists. "My fist breaks your swords!" The guards reached nervously for their weapons, but before things exploded into violence, another guard suddenly hurried over from nearby. This one looked terrified already. "Sir, I'll lend him my room for the night." Silence. The other guards stared at him like he had lost his mind. But Bramble immediately calmed down. The beast grinned. Now that sounded reasonable. The nervous guard quickly escorted Bramble through the castle halls and into a small room before anyone important could notice. Unfortunately, someone already had. King Gregory, the ruler of Iredell, stormed through the doorway, moments later, in full golden armor, his expression burning with fury. "What's going on here?" The room froze instantly. The frightened guard nearly collapsed where he stood. King Gregory's eyes locked onto him immediately. "You are helping fighters? Breaking castle rules?" The guard trembled uncontrollably. Bramble stood silently nearby, unsure if he was about to be thrown out of the tournament before it even began. Then suddenly, Gregory grabbed the guard by the throat. The terrified man gasped as Gregory lifted him slightly off the ground, choking him while glaring directly into his eyes. The lesson was clear. Rules mattered, and guards were not allowed to interfere with tournament fairness. Bramble watched carefully but said nothing. Even he understood something important in that moment. No matter how strong he was, King Gregory could make people disappear. The room felt heavy with fear as Gregory tightened his grip just enough to make the guard panic before finally throwing him back down. Then something unexpected happened. Gregory looked toward Bramble and said nothing. No threats, no punishment, no removal from the tournament, just silence, a dangerous silence. Then the king simply turned and walked out of the room. Bramble stared after him for a long moment. Deep down, he understood the truth. King Gregory was not threatened by him. Not yet, but perhaps. The king admired the courage it took for Bramble to stand at those gates with no fear at all. The guard, however, was nothing more than a disposable fool in Gregory's eyes. Once the footsteps disappeared down the hallway, the room finally relaxed again. Bramble sat down heavily inside the small chamber while the trembling guard tried catching his breath nearby. Tomorrow would be the tournament. And now, at last, Bramble was officially inside Iredale Castle. The streets of Wywood were never quiet. Even at night, the crooked city groaned with life. Lanterns flickered through cracked windows. Fighters wandered alleyways with bruised knuckles and hidden knives. Criminals bargained beside beggars. Runaways slept beneath broken carts, while mercenaries drank beside thieves like they were brothers. In Wywood, nobody cared where you came from, only whether you could survive. That was why the goblins came. For years, goblins from distant lands beyond Taginia drifted toward Wywood like wolves toward a storm. Some arrived hiding in wagons, some escaped kingdoms that hunted them. Others simply wanted freedom from rules, taxes, armies, or kings. Over time, they built homes, raised families, and became part of the city itself. Their laughter echoed through the taverns, their arguments filled the streets, their children climbed rooftops like spiders while guards from other lands looked on in disgust. But Wywood did not judge outsiders. Wywood embraced them. And among every goblin that ever stepped foot into the city, none became more feared than Mossbark. Mossbark was not a king, not a knight, not a hero. He was something far more dangerous, a rebel. Small in height, but built with brutal strength, Mossbark moved through the city like a shadow with teeth. He wore the golden crown of the Duke of Cord proudly upon his head, not as decoration, but as mockery. The same duke he murdered during the chaos surrounding the war in Iredale. The killing humiliated King Yaka and enraged the Blob Kingdom beyond measure. But Mossbark never apologized. In fact, he enjoyed the anger. The goblin walked through Wywood with his crossbow resting over his shoulder like he had all the time in the world. People whispered when he passed. Some feared him. Others admired him. Children followed him through markets, pretending sticks were crossbows. Tavern drunks told exaggerated stories about him punching through doors or escaping entire platoons of soldiers alone. And honestly, some of those stories were true. Most people thought the crossbow was what made Mossbark deadly. They were wrong. The weapon was only the beginning. Mossbark fought like an animal cornered in a cage. Fast, vicious, impossible to predict. He could climb walls, slip through windows, disappear into crowds, then suddenly appear behind his enemy before they even understood what happened. His punches landed with terrifying force. Many fighters twice his size underestimated him exactly one time. Then they woke up missing teeth, or did not wake up at all. Yet, despite the chaos surrounding him, Mossbark followed a strange code of his own. He did not target innocent people. He hated bullies, hated corrupt rulers, hated powerful men that abused the weak while hiding behind armies and gold. Whenever tyrants rose too high, somehow Mossbark appeared nearby, causing problems. Wagons exploded, guards vanished, supplies burned, secret messages leaked into taverns. No one could ever prove it was him, but everyone suspected, especially King Gregory. Mossbark despised Gregory's obsession with control and gold. He hated the Crocodile King's arrogance, hated the way Gregory treated workers and prisoners like property, but he also hated the Blobs of Cord and their growing influence across Taginia. During the war, Mossbark fought nobody's battle but his own. He attacked where he wanted, helped who he wanted, disappeared whenever armies tried to track him down. That made him impossible to control and impossible to trust, which was exactly why Wywood loved him, because Wywood itself could not be controlled. The city belonged to outsiders, criminals, wanderers, fighters, goblins, and broken people rejected by the rest of Taginia. In a world ruled by kings, banners, laws, and bloodlines, Mossbark represented something different. Freedom. Dangerous freedom. The kind that smiled while kingdoms burned. Late at night, people across Tigrinya still whispered stories about him. Some claimed he was planning to assassinate another ruler. Others believed he was building a rebellion beneath Wywood itself. A few swore they saw him sneaking through forests near Iredale, watching Gregory's soldiers from the trees. But nobody ever knew the truth, because Mossbark never stayed still long enough for anyone to understand him. And that was the most frightening thing of all.
Loud in here. Can't even taste my drink with that racket. If he hits that high note again, I'm plugging the loot. Never mind.
Meanwhile, in the rugged streets of Wywood, the goblin outlaw, known as Mossbark, wandered through the crowded alleys with his crossbow in hand and the stolen duke's crown resting proudly on his head. Wywood was always alive, with movement. Criminals traded goods in the shadows, outsiders gathered near taverns, and hooded figures watched from corners of the streets. Mossbark walked through it all like he owned the city. He was not looking for work, nor trouble. Specifically, trouble usually found him on its own. As the wind blew through the narrow roads between the old stone buildings, a small piece of paper floated wildly through the air. At first, Mossbark ignored it, believing it was just another piece of trash blown from the overflowing garbage piles of Wywood. The paper bounced off walls, rolled across the street, then suddenly flew directly toward his face. Mossbark quickly lifted his arm and snatched it from the air before it could smack into him. He looked down at the paper with narrowed eyes. An invite. Not just any invite either. It was an official invitation to the tournament at the castle of Iredale. Mossbark immediately understood what had happened. The criminal council had thrown away the tournament invitations they received from King Gregory. They wanted nothing to do with the tournament or with Iredale itself, but somehow the garbage must have spilled open, allowing one of the invites to escape the dumpster and drift through the city streets. Bramble had already discovered one invite earlier. Now, fate had delivered another directly into Mossbark's hands. Mossbark stared at the invitation silently for a moment. A dangerous grin slowly formed across his face. He knew very well that King Gregory did not like him. More importantly, King Yaka of Cord hated him even more. Mossbark had killed Yaka's prize duke and stolen the man's crown afterward as a trophy. Ever since then, Mossbark had become something of a legend among the goblins and criminals of Wywood. To appear at the tournament wearing that same crown would be an insult directly to Yaka's face, and that was exactly why Mossbark wanted to go. Danger never frightened him. In fact, Mossbark preferred danger. He enjoyed chaos, conflict, and humiliating powerful rulers who thought they controlled Tigrinya. The thought of entering Iredale Castle surrounded by enemies only made the tournament more exciting to him. Without hesitation, Mossbark folded the invitation and shoved it into his pocket. He was going to Iredale. Not for honor, not for glory, but for gold, violence, and trouble. The tournament promised enormous riches, and Mossbark already began imagining himself winning the grand prize and claiming the land of Lexington for the goblins of Wywood. He dreamed of filling Lexington with goblin homes, goblin markets, goblin guards, and goblin banners flying over the land. The kings of Tigrinya would hate it. That thought alone amused him greatly. Before leaving town, Mossbark gathered with several goblin friends in the streets of Wywood. The goblins surrounded him excitedly as he bragged loudly about killing the Duke of Cord. He pointed proudly to the stolen crown on his head and reminded them all that no goblin fighter in Tigrinya had ever accomplished something so bold. "I took this crown from a duke," Mossbark declared proudly. "If I can kill a duke, I can win Gregory's tournament too." The goblins cheered wildly around him. Some called him fearless, others called him amazing. Many shouted his name like he was already a champion. To the goblins of Wywood, Mossbark was more than a criminal. He was proof that goblins could stand against powerful kingdoms and survive. He represented rebellion, mockery, and freedom from rulers who looked down on them. Mossbark promised that if he won the tournament gold, he would return and share the wealth with his fellow goblins. He swore that Lexington would belong to goblins someday. Then, with the stolen crown still on his head and his crossbow ready in hand, Mossbark marched out from Wywood and into the forests leading toward Iredale Castle. Far ahead in the distance stood the stronghold of King Gregory, and whether Gregory realized it or not, trouble was now heading straight for his front gates. Mossbark wasted absolutely no time after leaving Wywood. The moment he accepted the tournament invite, he pushed straight through the forests toward Iredale Castle, with his crossbow ready and the stolen duke's crown shining on his head. He travelled quickly, almost recklessly, stomping through mud paths, shallow rivers, and dark trails without slowing down once. But even while travelling fast, Mossbark stayed alert. He knew Iredale was dangerous territory for somebody like him. King Gregory hated rebellion. King Yaka wanted revenge for the Duke Mossbark killed. If anyone recognized him before the tournament even started, there was always the possibility of an ambush, kidnapping, or some accident happening in the woods before he ever reached the castle gates. Still, Mossbark didn't fear any of it. Most creatures of the forest stayed far away from him anyway. Animals in Taginia had learned long ago not to bother goblins from Wywood. The scent of goblins alone scared many creatures away. Wolves avoided them. Wild boars fled from them. Even bandits often kept their distance. But crocodiles were different. Crocodiles feared nothing. And near Iredale Castle, the crocodiles ruled the waters. As Mossbark approached the castle roads, the swampy waters nearby began to stir. Eyes appeared just above the waterline. Massive jaws slowly emerged from the mud. Mossbark immediately spotted them and smirked to himself. "Want some?" he asked mockingly. The crocodiles lunged toward him without hesitation. But Mossbark was ready. The goblins of Wywood had fought crocodiles for decades, sometimes for food, sometimes for survival, sometimes simply for sport. Mossbark knew exactly where to strike them, and exactly how to avoid their deadly jaws. He smashed one crocodile across the face with his crossbow, knocking it sideways into the water. Another snapped toward his legs, only for Mossbark to stomp directly onto its skull with his heavy boot. The swamp exploded into chaos. Water splashed everywhere as crocodiles snapped wildly at him. But Mossbark kept attacking without fear. He punched one in the throat, slammed another into the mud, then grabbed one by the jaw and shoved it backward while laughing at it. The crocodiles fought hard, but Mossbark fought harder. Within minutes, the creatures finally backed away into the water, battered and defeated. Mossbark stood over one of them proudly, flexing his arms, while the towers of Iredale Castle rose in the distance behind him. "Domination," he muttered proudly. Without another thought, Mossbark casually walked up the path toward the front gates of Iredale Castle. Two guards stood near the entrance, watching him approach carefully. One of the guards immediately noticed the muddy crocodile blood on Mossbark's boots and armor. Mossbark grinned at them. "Those crocs got knocked," he joked proudly. The guards frowned at him uneasily. To them, Mossbark looked less like a tournament fighter and more like a violent lunatic wandering out of the swamps. But Mossbark didn't care what they thought. He pulled out his invitation and explained he was there to compete in King Gregory's tournament. Then he asked what it would cost to spend the night inside the castle before the fights began. The guards exchanged quick looks with one another. They whispered quietly under their breath. Finally, one of them answered, 3 silver coins." Mossbark slowly reached into his pocket, but inside his head he already knew something was wrong. He had heard enough rumors about Iredale Castle to know lodging only cost 2 silver coins for tournament fighters. The guards were trying to scam him for an extra coin because he was a goblin outsider. Mossbark decided to play along for a moment, just to see how bold they really were. He handed over the 3 silver coins without arguing. The guards started giggling to each other immediately. That was the mistake. Mosbach's face slowly changed from calm to dangerous. The smile disappeared completely. "What's so funny?" he asked coldly. The guards immediately stopped laughing. Mosbach stepped closer, glaring directly into their eyes. "Give me back the silver coin." The guards suddenly looked nervous. Mosbach tightened his grip around his crossbow and leaned toward them with an angry stare that felt almost animal-like. "I know it only costs 2 silver coins," Mosbach growled. "So, either you give it back, or somebody's going to get hurt." Silence filled the castle entrance. Even armed guards could feel the pressure coming off Mosbach. It was not just anger, it was confidence. The same confidence that allowed him to kill a duke and wear the man's crown afterward without fear of revenge. One of the guards nervously handed the extra coin back immediately. "Smart move," Mosbach said while taking the coin back. After that, the guards stayed completely quiet. No more laughing, no more whispering. They quickly escorted Mosbach deeper into the castle to his room while keeping their distance from him the entire time. And the strange thing was, Mosbach technically had no real power inside Iredell. King Gregory could imprison him whenever he wanted. The castle was filled with soldiers, stronger in numbers than any goblin could handle alone. Yet, despite all of that, people still feared Mosbach, not because of an army, not because of wealth, but because Mosbach carried himself like somebody completely unafraid of consequences. And in a place like Taginia, that kind of presence could shake even the bravest men. Mosbach is officially the 6th fighter in the Iredell tournament. Meanwhile, in the mighty city of Cord, where the Blob people marched proudly through the stone streets beneath the banners of King Yaka, another powerful fighter was beginning to rise through the ranks. His name was Aldrich. Unlike many famous warriors across Taginia, Aldrich did not begin his life as royalty, nobility, or a celebrated champion. Before the war in Iredell, Aldrich was simply another soldier among the armies of Cord. Quiet, serious, focused. Most people barely noticed him at first, because Aldrich never cared for attention or praise. He preferred training over talking and discipline over celebration. But everything changed after the death of Cord's former duke. When Mosbach killed the duke and stole his crown, the entire city of Cord was thrown into anger and humiliation. King Yaka took the insult personally. The death of his duke left a massive hole within the leadership of Cord's military forces, and somebody strong enough had to step forward to replace him. That somebody became Aldrich. King Yaka personally promoted him to duke and commander of Cord's armies. Many soldiers were surprised at first, but not for long. Aldrich quickly proved why he deserved the role. He was one of the deadliest sword fighters in Cord, especially with his dual blades. He fought with incredible balance and patience, focusing heavily on defense and endurance. Aldrich was not reckless like many fighters in Taginia. He studied movement carefully, blocked attacks efficiently, and waited for the perfect opportunity to strike. He could take heavy punishment without slowing down and continue fighting long after others collapsed from exhaustion. But Aldrich's greatest strength was not just combat, it was leadership. Long before becoming duke, Aldrich spent years training the Blob soldiers and knights of Cord. Every morning, he could be found in the training yards, teaching soldiers how to defend properly, move faster with swords, and fight with discipline instead of anger. His methods were strict, but they worked. Under Aldrich's training, the Blob armies became far stronger and more organized. And the people listened to him. Not just Blobs either. Humans living in Cord respected Aldrich greatly as well. The city of Cord was unique compared to many lands in Taginia, because Blobs and humans lived side by side peacefully. Merchants, soldiers, workers, and families all shared the streets together without conflict. Aldrich believed strongly in protecting everyone in the city equally. no matter what they were. He often walked through the markets checking on struggling citizens, speaking with workers, and making sure food and supplies reached the people properly. Despite becoming Duke, Aldrich never acted above anyone else. He still sat among regular citizens during meals. He still trained soldiers personally. He still listened when ordinary people spoke. To Aldrich, leadership was responsibility, not privilege. During the Great Iredell War, Aldrich fought fiercely alongside King Gregory's alliance and defended Iredell Castle with remarkable success. He personally defeated many rats from Jacques during the brutal fighting and managed to escape the war without serious injury. His performance during the war only increased his reputation throughout Cord and Iredell alike. King Gregory himself respected Aldrich greatly, and Aldrich respected Gregory in return, because Gregory treated the Blobs of Cord as valuable allies instead of weak outsiders. Aldrich strongly believed the Blob people were often disrespected throughout Teginia and that they needed to become tougher and stronger if they wanted other kingdoms to truly respect them. That belief drove everything Aldrich did. No jokes, no laziness, no excuses. Aldrich carried himself with constant seriousness, and even other soldiers became uncomfortable joking around him because of how intense his presence could feel. Yet, beneath that cold exterior was somebody who genuinely cared about the future of Cord and its people. He wanted the city to prosper, he wanted the Blob people to rise higher, and he wanted Cord to become impossible to disrespect ever again. Still, one thought remained deep inside Aldrich's mind. Mosbach, the goblin who killed the previous duke, the goblin who stole the crown and mocked Cord openly afterward. Aldrich knew the story well. Every soldier in Cord did, and although Aldrich rarely spoke about revenge, part of him hoped their paths would cross someday, because if Mosbach truly believed Cord had grown weak after the duke's death, then Aldrich intended to prove him very wrong. Back in the city of Cord, Aldrich spent most of his day the same way he always did, walking through the city streets, checking on the soldiers, watching the training grounds, and making sure the people of Cord were doing well. The Blob citizens respected him deeply now that he had become Duke, but Aldrich never acted differently because of his title. He still carried himself like a soldier first. As he moved through the city, word eventually reached him that King Yaka had been searching for him personally. Aldrich immediately turned toward the castle. The relationship between Aldrich and King Yaka had grown strong ever since the Iredell War. Yaka trusted Aldrich completely. In fact, King Yaka believed appointing Aldrich as Duke was one of the best decisions he had ever made. Aldrich was dependable, disciplined, and loyal to Cord above all else. So Aldrich wasted no time heading inside the castle halls looking for the king. "King Yaka, where are you?" Aldrich called while walking through the stone corridors with both swords hanging at his sides. Moments later, he found King Yaka near the castle bathroom of all places. "Aldrich, my number one!" Yaka shouted excitedly the moment he saw him. That was typical King Yaka behavior. Yaka was loud, energetic, and always overly enthusiastic around the fighters he admired most. He constantly praised Aldrich because he genuinely wanted his top warrior to feel appreciated. To Yaka, Aldrich was more than just a duke. He was proof that the Blob people could produce elite fighters equal to anyone in Teginia. Meanwhile, Aldrich simply stood there quietly waiting for the king to explain what he wanted. Eventually, Yaka realized Aldrich was getting impatient. "You looking for me?" Aldrich finally asked. King Yaka grinned before pulling out a folded invitation. "I need you to fight in a tournament." The moment Aldrich saw the symbol of Iredell on the invitation, he immediately understood the situation. King Gregory was organizing the massive tournament inside Iredell Castle, and Cord had been invited to participate. King Yaka handed Aldrich the invitation personally. "King Gregory gave me this," Yaka explained, and I want you to represent Cord." Yaka began pacing while explaining why the tournament mattered so much. Gregory was offering enormous amounts of gold and even land to the winner. For the Blob people of Cord, land meant everything. Cord had become overcrowded over the years, with more Blob families and soldiers filling the city constantly. New territory would allow the Blobs to expand and strengthen their future. "This fight is important," Yaka told him seriously. "This isn't just opportunity. This is a job." Aldrich listened quietly. Truthfully, Aldrich did not care much for tournaments or fame. But when King Yaka gave an order, Aldrich followed it. His loyalty to Cord came before his personal feelings, so without complaint, Aldrich accepted the invitation. The two shook hands firmly before Aldrich returned to prepare for the journey. Not long afterward, Aldrich packed his supplies and headed through the forests toward Iredale Castle. Fortunately for him, Cord and Iredale were neighboring territories, so the trip itself did not take very long. The forests remained calm during most of the journey. No wolves, no thieves, no dangerous animals. At least, not at first, because eventually the crocodiles appeared. The closer Aldrich moved toward Iredale, the more swampy the land became. Soon, several crocodiles slowly emerged from the waters nearby, staring directly at him as they crept through the mud. Aldrich immediately recognized what was happening. King Gregory's crocodiles. The beasts began following him carefully before finally rushing toward him from multiple directions. Unlike Mossbark, however, Aldrich had no interest in fighting them. He simply sighed. "Whoa!" Then calmly and intelligently, Aldrich picked up several sticks from the ground and threw them far into the water one after another. The crocodiles instantly turned toward the splashing noises and charged after the sticks like they were food. Aldrich watched them go and almost laughed to himself. "These little monsters are resilient," he muttered. But Aldrich understood something important about Gregory's crocodiles. They were aggressive, but not very smart. Distracting them was often easier than fighting them directly. So, while the crocodiles chased the splashes, Aldrich casually continued walking toward the castle entrance without even drawing his swords. No battle, no struggle, just quick thinking. Still, Aldrich knew better than to stand around too long afterward. Those crocodiles would eventually realize they had been tricked, and when they did, they would come right back. So Aldrich picked up his pace and arrived at the massive front gates of Iredale Castle. 2 armored guards stood waiting outside. As Aldrich approached, the guards quietly whispered to one another. "Look, a blob," one muttered. Aldrich noticed immediately that they were not taking him seriously at first, but Aldrich remained calm. He greeted the guards respectfully with a handshake and explained that he came from the city of Cord, carrying an official invitation to fight in Gregory's tournament. Then he mentioned something very important. "I was sent by King Yaka." The guards' attitudes changed instantly. The moment Yaka's name was spoken, the soldiers straightened themselves and treated Aldrich with immediate respect. Gregory had given strict orders regarding the blob fighters of Cord. They were allies of Iredale, not common visitors. King Gregory valued Cord greatly. The alliance between Gregory and Yaka had grown extremely strong during the war. The two kingdoms backed one another through trade, politics, and battle. Gregory especially admired how disciplined and loyal the blob armies were. So unlike the other tournament fighters arriving at the castle, Aldrich received special treatment. No silver coin fee, no suspicious tricks, no insults. The guards welcomed him inside respectfully and informed him that King Gregory had already prepared a special room for him personally. That alone showed how much Gregory valued the Blob Alliance. Yet, despite the kindness shown to him, Aldrich still felt uneasy walking through the halls of Iredale Castle. Something about the place bothered him. The dark stone walls, the silence, the feeling of being watched constantly. Aldrich respected King Gregory as an ally, but deep down, he did not truly like Iredale itself. To him, the castle felt cold, creepy, and almost evil. Unlike Mossbark or Gregory, Aldrich was not driven by chaos or cruelty. He was simply a soldier, following orders from his king. And as Aldrich disappeared deeper into the halls of Iredale Castle, he could not shake the feeling that something dangerous was waiting inside. It is official. Aldrich is the 7th fighter in the Iredale tournament. Deep within the busy streets of the city of Cord, most outsiders notice the same thing immediately. Blobs everywhere. The city is filled with them. Blob merchants run shops beside human traders. Blob soldiers patrol the walls while humans work the markets and taverns. Cord is one of the few places in Taginia where different kinds of people coexist peacefully together. But even inside Cord, divisions still exist. Most blobs are smooth-skinned, with little to no hair at all. Different colors are common among them: grey, blue, brown, greenish shades. But hair is considered unusual for blob kind, very unusual. Then there are the rare ones, the hairy blobs. Blobs born with thick hair covering their bodies are uncommon throughout Taginia, and sadly, many people in Cord look down on them because of it. Some consider them strange. Others think they look wild or uncivilized. Many simply laugh at them openly in the streets. And among all the hairy blobs in Cord, one stands above the rest: Gurgel. The moment people see him, they notice how different he looks from everyone else. Thick hair covers most of his body, while glowing yellow eyes stare from beneath his cap. Strange whip-like green tendrils hang from his arms, and sharp yellow spikes can extend from his fists whenever he prepares to fight. And despite how often people mock him, nobody truly wants to fight him. Because Gurgel is dangerous, very dangerous. In fact, many people quietly believe Gurgel might actually be one of the strongest fighters in all of Cord. Some even argue he could rival Aldrich himself in pure combat speed. Gurgel fights aggressively, moving faster than most opponents can react to. His whip-like tendrils crack through the air with incredible force, striking enemies from strange angles before they can defend themselves. And if the whips don't get you first, his fists will. The spikes, hidden within his hands, make every punch brutal. One clean hit from Gurgel can leave somebody bleeding in the dirt, wondering what just happened. He is the kind of fighter who overwhelms opponents quickly, before they even realize the danger they are in. Still, even with all his strength, the people of Cord continue to mock him. Children stare. Groups laugh when he walks by. Some blobs whisper insults under their breath. Others openly point at him, like he is some strange creature wandering through the city streets. But Gurgel rarely lets it get to him. That is what makes him different. Many fighters would become bitter or angry after years of disrespect. Yet Gurgel keeps moving through life with confidence and energy. In fact, he often jokes around constantly, making loud comments, strange humor, and sarcastic remarks that confuse people around him even more. To many citizens of Cord, Gurgel feels too weird, too loud, too wild, too different. But Gurgel truly does not care anymore. He knows exactly who he is. He knows exactly what he's capable of. And he understands something the people mocking him fail to realize. Having hair does not make him weak, ugly, or lesser than anyone else. If anything, it made him stronger. Because surviving years of ridicule forced Gurgel to develop thick skin, both physically and mentally. He learned, long ago, not to let insults control him. He simply continues walking through the city with confidence while proving himself over and over again through combat, skill, and determination. And while many people laugh at Gurgel, they also fear crossing the line with him. Mocking him from a distance is one thing. Putting hands on him is another. Because everybody in Cord knows the same truth. If Gurgel decides to fight back, somebody is getting dropped into the dirt very quickly. So Gurgel continues living his life his own way, refusing to hide who he is. Whether people accept him or not no longer matters to him. Every day he walks through Cord proudly, representing the hairy blobs who are treated like outsiders in their own city, and whether the people of Cord admit it or not, Gurgel is slowly forcing them to respect what makes him different.
Very sweet as morning dew.
Oh, cool hat.
Thanks, kid.
Take care out there, stranger.
Always do.
Morning settled over the city of Cord as workers opened shops, blob merchants rolled carts into the streets, and messengers traveled from house to house, delivering letters and notices throughout the city. Most mornings passed quietly for Gurgel. Usually, nobody wrote to him. Nobody checked on him. Most people in Cord either ignored him or mocked him openly. So, when Gurgel noticed a letter sitting inside his mailbox, he froze for a moment in confusion. That alone was unusual. At first he assumed it was probably some kind of bill or pointless city notice, but as soon as he grabbed the envelope, his glowing eyes widened slightly. The seal belonged to Iredell. Immediately, excitement started building inside him. Gurgel quickly ripped open the envelope without hesitation, almost tearing the paper in half, trying to see what was inside. Then he saw it. An invitation. An official invite to fight in King Gregory's tournament at Iredell Castle. For a few seconds, Gurgel just stared at the paper in disbelief. Then the excitement exploded out of him all at once. "Oh yeah!" he shouted excitedly, while jumping around his home. Nobody had ever really chosen Gurgel for anything important before. Most people treated him like an unwanted outsider. Yet, somehow, King Gregory himself had invited him to compete beside the strongest fighters in all of Taginia. To Gurgel, it felt like winning the lottery. The prize alone sounded unbelievable. Gold, fame, land, opportunity. But more importantly, the tournament offered him something he had wanted his entire life. A chance to prove everybody wrong. Gurgel truly believed he could compete against anybody in Taginia. He knew how fast he was. He knew how dangerous his whip attacks were. He knew what those spikes in his fists could do to an opponent. And now, the entire world might finally see it. He started pacing around excitedly, imagining himself defeating famous fighters one after another. Then he stopped in front of a mirror, looked at his own reflection, and smiled proudly. "Hi," he said to himself cheerfully, like he was greeting a future champion. Moments later, he was jumping around his house again, yelling, "Taginia!" repeatedly, while waving the invitation in the air. For once in his life, Gurgel felt truly seen. But beneath all that excitement, there was a dangerous question Gurgel failed to think about carefully enough. Why him? Gurgel never fought in the Iredell War. He was not loyal to King Yaka. He was not part of Gregory's inner circle. And King Gregory was not known for randomly helping outsiders succeed. Gregory always had plans behind his actions. Always. So, why would somebody like Gregory invite a rebellious, mocked, unpredictable fighter like Gurgel into his castle? There was clearly a reason. But Gurgel's excitement completely drowned out his caution. Instead of questioning the invitation further, he immediately packed his belongings and headed out toward the forests leading to Iredell Castle. Cord was close enough to Iredell that the journey would only take a short time, and in Gurgel's mind, his future was finally beginning. As he moved through the woods, excitedly, however, somebody suddenly appeared in the distance, standing directly in his path. King Yaka. The moment Gurgel saw him, his excitement faded slightly, and King Yaka wasted absolutely no time being cruel. "No one likes you," Yaka said immediately, without even greeting him first. That was the relationship between them. King Yaka genuinely disliked Gurgel. To Yaka, Gurgel was embarrassing, strange, unfit to represent Cord publicly. Yaka respected disciplined fighters like Aldrich, but Gurgel's appearance, humor, and unpredictable personality irritated him deeply, and unfortunately for Gurgel, Yaka always found ways to remind him of that hatred. Gurgel stood there, silently gripping his whip while listening to the insults. Deep down, he wanted to snap back badly. He wanted to yell at Yaka, challenge him, maybe even attack him, but he knew better. King Yaka was still the ruler of Kord. One wrong response could land Gurgel in the dungeon immediately. So instead, Gurgel simply stared at him, silently. Ironically, that silence only made Yaka more annoyed. King Yaka mistook the silence for weakness, cowardice. "You're a complete loser," Yaka continued mockingly. Still, Gurgel refused to answer. He lowered his eyes slightly and continued walking toward the forest without another word. But inside his mind, something was burning fiercely. Gurgel was tired of being mocked, tired of being treated like trash, tired of being told he was unwanted, and now he finally had the opportunity to prove every single person in Kord wrong, especially King Yaka. Gurgel clenched the invitation tightly in his hand while continuing deeper into the woods toward Iredell Castle. He was going to enter Gregory's tournament. He was going to defeat powerful fighters, and somehow, some way, he was going to force King Yaka to finally acknowledge him, because in Gurgel's eyes, the tournament was not just about gold anymore. It was personal. The forest around Iredell Castle felt damp and restless as Gurgel marched forward through the muddy paths. Unlike many fighters traveling from distant lands, Gurgel did not have far to go. The city of Kord rested close to Iredell, but the short distance did not make the journey any less important. Every step filled Gurgel with determination. King Yaka never believed much in him. Most people in Kord laughed at him, ignored him, or treated him like a nuisance. But this tournament was different. This was Gurgel's chance to prove everybody wrong. If he could win King Gregory's tournament, then all of Taginia would finally know his name. As the castle walls slowly appeared through the trees, Gurgel sensed movement in the water nearby. He narrowed his glowing eyes immediately. Trouble, just like the rumors said. King Gregory had filled the waters around Iredell with crocodiles to test the fighters arriving for the tournament. It was Gregory's twisted way of entertaining himself before the matches even began. The crocodiles emerged from the swampy water with low growls and snapping jaws, their yellow eyes locked onto Gurgel as they slowly surrounded him. Most travelers would panic. Gurgel did not. Without hesitation, Gurgel lunged forward and kicked one crocodile directly in the head, splashing muddy water everywhere. Another crocodile charged from the side, only for Gurgel to swing another brutal kick into its jaw. The reptiles hissed angrily, but they refused to back away. More crocodiles pushed toward him through the swamp water. Gurgel growled in frustration. "Come on then," he shouted. And the crocodiles kept charging, so Gurgel changed tactics. He began swinging heavy punches with his spiked fists. The spikes smashed into crocodile snouts and scales, forcing several beasts backward. One crocodile attempted to bite his arm, but Gurgel quickly whipped one of his long green tendrils across its face. The whip-like strike cracked loudly through the air. Another tendril wrapped around a crocodile's neck and threw it sideways into the water. Splash after splash echoed through the swamp as Gurgel attacked wildly from every direction. The crocodiles finally realized they were dealing with something far more dangerous than an ordinary traveler. One by one, the reptiles backed away into the murky water. Gurgel stood there, breathing heavily, while water dripped from his armor and fur. He stared toward the distant castle, with disgust written across his face. "King Gregory is always up to no good," Gurgel muttered to himself. He knew this tournament was not going to be fair. Gregory was cruel, manipulative, and dangerous. The crocodiles were proof enough already, but Gurgel refused to turn back now. Not after receiving that invite, not after finally being given a chance. The crocodiles disappeared beneath the water, and Gurgel continued onward toward the giant castle gates of Iredell. When he finally arrived, 2 armored guards stood silently at the front entrance, like statues, spears in hand, faces hidden behind steel helmets. Neither one looked impressed by the strange green blob creature approaching them. Gurgel stopped in front of them and tilted his head. "Why so serious?" he asked jokingly. The guard said nothing. Gurgel proudly pulled out the tournament invite and waved it around. "King Gregory invited me," he said excitedly. "I'm ready to fight." Still, the guards barely reacted. Their silence only made Gurgel more energetic. Instead of getting nervous, he started dancing right there in front of the castle entrance. His tendrils waved around wildly as he stomped his feet and bounced side to side. To Gurgel, dancing was not strange at all. In fact, it was how he greeted people. Whenever he met somebody new, he danced. It made him feel alive. It made him feel confident. But the guards only stared at him blankly. To them, Gurgel looked ridiculous, just another weird green-haired fighter pretending he could survive the tournament. They doubted he would last long against the monsters and warriors arriving from all over Taginia. Gurgel pointed proudly at himself while continuing to dance. "I'm the victor here!" he shouted confidently. The guards exchanged a brief glance before finally opening the castle doors. One guard motioned for Gurgel to follow him inside toward the fighter quarters. Like the others before him, Gurgel had to pay 2 silver coins for a room to stay in before the matches began. Gregory might promise glory and gold, but nothing in Iredell ever came free. As the castle doors closed behind him, Gurgel looked around with excitement burning in his eyes. He had officially entered the Iredell tournament. The 8th fighter had arrived. Morning light crept through the stone windows of Iredell Castle as the day of the tournament finally arrived. The halls of the castle had already become louder than usual. Guards marched through corridors, cooks prepared massive meals in the kitchens, and fighters all across the castle were waking up with nerves, excitement, or pure aggression. Inside one of the stone rooms, Bramble rested peacefully in bed after a solid night of sleep. Unlike some of the other fighters, tossing and turning from anxiety, Bramble slept comfortably. He had no fear about the tournament. In his mind, he was built for this kind of violence. A loud knock suddenly echoed through the room before the heavy wooden door swung open. "Wake up, Bramble," one of Gregory's guards ordered. But Bramble was already awake. The massive horse fighter shot upright immediately with glowing red eyes full of energy. He looked more excited than tired. The tournament was finally here, and Bramble had been waiting for a chance like this his entire life. King Gregory had promised every fighter a quality breakfast before the matches began. Gregory wanted the competitors strong, fed, and ready for combat. A weak fighter made for boring entertainment. Bramble requested exactly what he wanted: steak, chicken, greens, and Gregory's castle delivered. The guard rolled a table into the room, carrying plates stacked with hot meat and vegetables. Bramble grinned immediately and grabbed the food without hesitation. He tore into the steak like a wild beast, stuffing food into his mouth while laughing between bites. Grease dripped from his sharp teeth as he devoured nearly everything on the table within minutes. The guard stood nearby, holding a large tournament bracket sheet. While Bramble continued eating, the guard unfolded the bracket and showed him the first matchup. Bramble's eyes locked onto the name: Gurgel. At first, Bramble just stared silently. Then he burst out laughing. "A little punk," Bramble growled with amusement. He nearly choked from laughing so hard. In Bramble's mind, this was not a real fight. It was a joke, a warm-up. He had already seen Gurgel dancing around the castle and acting foolish in front of the guards. Compared to Bramble's towering size and brutal strength, Gurgel looked tiny. "Heh, Gurgel," Bramble laughed. "He's tiny." The guard smirked slightly, clearly entertained by Bramble's confidence. Bramble stood up from the table and flexed his massive arms proudly. "Look at me," he shouted. He pounded his chest armor loudly before pointing at himself again. "Compared to me," Bramble sneered. The horse fighter walked around the room, bragging about his size, strength, and power. He could already picture himself crushing Gurgel in front of the crowd. To Bramble, this matchup was unfair in his favor. "That little pest doesn't stand a chance," he said. The guard didn't disagree. Truthfully, many of Gregory's guards already had opinions on the tournament. Some secretly favored certain fighters. Some were already placing bets in the halls of Iredale Castle. And Bramble, he looked like a safe choice to many of them. Big, violent, intimidating. Meanwhile, Gurgel looked strange, goofy, and unpredictable. Bramble continued bragging while pacing the room. "I'll crush him in seconds," he said confidently. Then, fueled by adrenaline, Bramble suddenly punched the stone wall beside him. Crack chunks of stone exploded outward across the floor. The guard immediately looked over in disbelief, but Bramble only laughed harder. Fueled by his ego, he smashed the wall again with another heavy punch. More stone broke apart and dust filled the room. The guard slowly shook his head. King Gregory was not going to be happy about damage to his castle walls. Gregory valued control, order, and especially his property. Fighters were allowed to fight in the arena, not destroy Iredale itself. Still, the guard didn't stop Bramble. Part of him admired the raw power. Another part of him probably had money riding on Bramble winning the fight. Bramble pointed toward the broken wall and grinned proudly. "You see that?" he barked. "That's what happens to Gurgel." The guard crossed his arms silently while staring at the cracks spreading through the castle stone. Bramble, however, only became more excited. In his mind, the tournament was already over. He already believed himself to be the victor of the Iredale tournament before the first punch had even been thrown. Deep within the stone halls of Iredale Castle, another fighter still slept while the castle slowly came alive for tournament day. In a quiet room, lit by faint morning light, Mossbark remained buried in bed, barely moving at all. Goblins were known for sleeping longer than humans, and Mossbark was no exception. Once asleep, he slept deeply, peacefully, like a creature completely unconcerned with danger. Then came the knocking. "Knock! Knock! Knock!" Mossbark slowly opened one eye and let out a long, irritated yawn. He did not rush. He sat there for a moment, scratching his head while the knocking continued outside the door. Mossbark already distrusted most people, especially inside Iredale Castle. A place ruled by King Gregory was not somewhere you answered doors quickly or carelessly. The knocking became louder. "Knock! Knock! Knock!" Mossbark groaned and finally climbed out of bed. He grabbed his crossbow before walking toward the door. Carefully, his sharp goblin ears twitched as he listened for movement outside. Another loud knock rattled the door. Mossbark shook his head in annoyance before finally opening it. Standing outside was one of Gregory's guards, carrying an enormous amount of food on trays. Instantly, Mossbark's mood changed. Food. Now he was fully awake. King Gregory had promised every fighter a meal before the tournament, and Mossbark had taken full advantage of the offer. He requested chicken, steak, potatoes, and even an entire apple pie for dessert. Secretly, Mossbark never believed Gregory's servants would actually bring all of it, but there it was. Fresh, hot, smelling incredible. The guard carefully carried the food inside while Mossbark stared at the feast with wide eyes. Steam rose from the meat while the apple pie sat perfectly baked beside the potatoes. Mossbark grinned. "This is acceptable," he muttered. He immediately began eating with savage speed, tearing through chicken and steak while barely stopping to breathe. The goblin looked happier with food in front of him than almost anything else in the world. As Mossbark ate, he noticed the guards staring at the meal. Without hesitation, Mossbark pointed toward the table. "You can eat too," he said. The guard looked surprised but accepted the offer. Soon both of them sat together inside the room, eating before the tournament began. For a brief moment, the room actually felt calm. Then the guard pulled out the tournament bracket. Mossbark grabbed the sheet with greasy fingers and looked over the names carefully. Then his eyes narrowed. Aldrich, another blob fighter from Cord. Mossbark slowly leaned back in his chair while thinking about it. Interesting. He had already killed Cord's former duke during an earlier conflict and stolen the duke's crown afterward as a trophy. That act alone made Mossbark infamous throughout parts of Taginia. Many people hated him for it. Others feared him. And now, somehow, his first tournament opponent was connected to Cord again. Mossbark smirked suspiciously. Was this planned? He wondered aloud. The coincidence felt too perfect. Mossbark continued eating while staring down at the bracket. If Aldrich was connected to Cord's leadership in any way, then defeating him would send another message to King Yaka and the city of Cord. Maybe Mossbark could take another crown. After finishing nearly all the food, Mossbark left his room and began wandering through the halls of Iredell Castle with his crossbow in hand. The closer the tournament got, the more restless he became, and Mossbark loved attention. As guards and servants walked through the halls, Mossbark bragged loudly to nearly anyone willing to listen. "I once killed a duke from Yaka's army," he said proudly. Some guards immediately looked uncomfortable. "And I'll do it again," Mossbark added with a grin. The goblin seemed to enjoy building anxiety around himself. He wanted people nervous. He wanted people whispering his name. Fear was entertaining to him. But the more he talked, the more dangerous the situation became. Iredell had a strong alliance with Cord. King Gregory relied heavily on King Yaka and Cord's military support during the war, openly bragging about killing Cord's duke and threatening another important fighter from Cord was not something Gregory's castle wanted to hear. Two guards exchanged uneasy looks as Mossbark continued speaking proudly about crowns, death, and defeating Aldrich. Mossbark either did not notice the tension, or he simply did not care. The goblin walked through the castle halls, grinning confidently with his crossbow resting in his hands, completely unaware that his mouth might drag him into serious trouble before the tournament even began. And somewhere else, inside Iredell Castle, Aldrich was preparing too. In another chamber, deep within Iredell Castle, Aldrich rested quietly beneath thick blankets while the morning slowly unfolded outside his window. Unlike many of the other fighters packed into ordinary guest rooms, Aldrich had been given what the guards called a special room. Truthfully, it did not look much different than the others. The same stone walls, the same narrow windows, the same cold castle atmosphere. But the treatment around him was different. The guards spoke to Aldrich with respect. Servants addressed him carefully. After all, Aldrich represented the city of Cord, one of King Gregory's strongest allies during the war, and after the death of Cord's former duke, Aldrich now carried greater importance than ever before. As morning arrived, Aldrich slowly opened his glowing eyes. He did not feel tired at all. In fact, he felt incredible, strong, focused, calm, the best he had felt in a very long time. But one important thing was missing: food. Blobs needed energy early in the morning, or their bodies would become sluggish and slow. Without proper food, their strength and focus faded quickly. Aldrich understood this well, so instead of rushing around the castle, he patiently stayed in bed, waiting for the guards to bring his meal. Eventually, there was movement outside his room. The guards arrived, carrying trays of food, specifically prepared for blob fighters. Unlike humans, blobs rarely enjoyed ordinary meals. Meat and vegetables did little for them. Instead, they preferred unusual foods, rich in sugar, oils, and strange nutrients. Aldrich's meal consisted of black nebula carrots sliced carefully and covered in melted peanut sauce. Strange, to most people. Perfect for a blob. The rich peanut sauce provided energy, while the rare carrots helped fuel the strange biology of blob warriors. Aldrich accepted the meal calmly and nodded respectfully toward the guards. "Thank you," he said politely. The guards appreciated Aldrich far more than some of the louder or more chaotic fighters in the castle. Aldrich carried himself with discipline. He spoke respectfully. He caused no problems. After finishing the strange meal, Aldrich finally left his room and walked through the halls of Iredale Castle. Guards, servants, and tournament staff moved quickly through the corridors, preparing for the opening fights. Along the stone walls hung the official tournament brackets. Aldrich stopped in front of one immediately. His eyes slowly scanned downward. Then he saw the name. Mossbark. The moment Aldrich read it, his expression hardened. So it was true. The goblin who murdered Cord's former duke would be standing directly across from him in the arena. Aldrich stared silently at the bracket for several moments. This fight suddenly became far more personal. The death of the former duke was exactly why Aldrich now stood in this position. Cord had lost an important warrior and symbol of leadership because of Mossbark, and now fate, or perhaps King Gregory himself, had arranged the matchup. Aldrich clenched his fist tightly. Part of him burned with anger, another part wanted revenge. In Aldrich's mind, Mossbark was overrated. Lucky. Dangerous, yes, but not unstoppable. Aldrich believed the goblin got fortunate killing the duke. This time would be different. "I can win this easily," Aldrich told himself confidently. He turned and headed back toward his room. But before he could fully settle in again, knock, knock. Aldrich paused. Another knock followed. He opened the door carefully and immediately stood straighter. King Yaka himself stood outside the room. The ruler of Cord had personally arrived at Iredale Castle. Aldrich looked genuinely surprised. "King Yaka, are you here to watch me fight?" Aldrich asked. King Yaka stepped into the room with a serious expression on his face. This was not simply about supporting a tournament fighter. This was personal. Mossbark had humiliated Cord by killing the duke and stealing his crown. Yaka never forgot it, never forgave it, and now the tournament offered the perfect opportunity for justice. "The land of Lexington must be ours," King Yaka declared firmly. But beneath those words was another message entirely. Mossbark needed to suffer. King Yaka spoke passionately with Aldrich, giving him advice, encouragement, and strategies for the upcoming fight. He told Aldrich to stay composed, stay patient, punish Mossbark's arrogance. Aldrich listened carefully. The more Yaka spoke, the more motivated Aldrich became. Truthfully, Aldrich never expected the king himself to come support him personally. That alone filled him with pride and determination. Finally, King Yaka extended his hand. Aldrich shook it firmly. "For Cord," they both agreed. At that moment, the two blob warriors shared the same goal: victory, revenge, and the destruction of Mossbark's confidence. Meanwhile, somewhere else inside Iredale Castle, Mossbark continued wandering around, bragging loudly without realizing just how serious the situation had become. The Blobs were no longer grieving. Now, they were plotting. After speaking with King Yaka, Aldrich headed toward one of the training rooms deep inside the castle. Iron weights, swords, and training equipment filled the chamber. Without hesitation, Aldrich began lifting massive weights to prepare for battle. His muscles tightened, his breathing steadied, his anger focused. The Blobs of Cord were coming for revenge, and Aldrich intended to deliver it personally in the tournament arena. A few rooms away from the other fighters, Gurgel remained sprawled out across his bed while morning sunlight slowly poured through the castle window. The warm light hit his fuzzy green face directly, finally pulling him awake from a deep sleep. Gurgel let out a massive yawn while stretching his arms. Unlike some of the nervous fighters pacing around the castle all night, Gurgel had rested surprisingly well. His body felt energized, his mind felt clear, and most importantly, he felt excited. Today was tournament day. As Gurgel sat up in bed, he immediately began wondering who his first opponent would be. Somewhere inside the castle, fighters were already preparing weapons, stretching muscles, or making plans to survive the opening matches. Then, suddenly, "Creak!" The door to his room slowly opened. 3 guards stepped inside carrying plates of food covered by metal lids. Gurgel's eyes widened instantly. He already knew what it was. Blob food. The guards carefully uncovered the plates to reveal sliced black nebula carrots covered in melted peanut sauce, the strange energy-filled meal preferred by Blobs. It was the same kind of food Aldrich requested earlier that morning, but Gurgel requested something extra, something special. One guard slowly placed a glass bowl beside Gurgel's bed. Vanilla ice cream. Gurgel stared at it in complete shock, his glowing eyes practically lit up. "Oh!" he shouted happily. Blobs absolutely loved sugar, and Gurgel especially loved sweets. Candy, syrup, pastries, ice cream. Anything sugary immediately grabbed his attention. The fact that King Gregory's castle actually provided him with quality vanilla ice cream almost felt suspicious. Gurgel narrowed his eyes at the dessert carefully. "It's probably poisoned," he muttered, then he shrugged and immediately started eating it anyway. If there truly was dangerous poison inside, Gurgel apparently did not care enough to stop himself. The ice cream tasted too good to ignore. In fact, Gurgel quickly decided it might actually be the best ice cream in all of Taginia. Meanwhile, the guards stood nearby, holding the tournament bracket. As Gurgel finished his food, they showed him the opening matchup. Bramble. Gurgel tilted his head slightly. He did not know much about Bramble yet, but the guards clearly expected him to be intimidated by the name. Some of them exchanged doubtful looks toward Gurgel, as if they already assumed the hairy blob had no chance. But Gurgel only grinned. "I'm ready," he announced confidently. The guards didn't look convinced. Still, Gurgel seemed completely unfazed by the challenge ahead. To him, the tournament was exciting, dangerous perhaps, but exciting. After eating the rest of his food, Gurgel decided he did not want to sit around waiting in his room. Instead, he wandered through the stone hallways of Iredell Castle, curiously observing the other fighters and strange activity happening around him. That was when he heard something unusual further down the hallway. Soft footsteps, a door creaking open. Gurgel quietly peeked around the corner, and there he was. Silas, one of the tournament fighters. But something immediately looked suspicious. Silas wore a red robe, draped awkwardly over his body, like he was trying to disguise himself. Gurgel narrowed his eyes while spying carefully from behind the wall. Then he noticed something else, a bright golden key in Silas's hand. Gurgel's expression changed immediately. "What is he doing?" Gurgel whispered. Silas looked around nervously before quickly hurrying toward another room deeper in the castle. For just a brief moment, Gurgel caught sight of the fighter grinning strangely while hiding the key beneath the robe. The entire thing felt wrong. Gurgel knew enough about roaches and scavengers to understand one important lesson. Never trust them around valuables. Silas clearly looked like he was sneaking around doing something mischievous, maybe stealing, maybe spying, maybe something worse. Gurgel carefully stayed hidden while Silas disappeared into another room. The hairy blob slowly stepped back into the hallway, now feeling uneasy. But the strange morning was not over yet. As Gurgel continued walking through the castle, he eventually stopped near a large window overlooking the outside grounds. Something below caught his attention immediately. A woman stood near the bushes outside. Chelsea, King Gregory's sister. Gurgel watched silently from the shadows while Chelsea glanced around carefully to make sure nobody was watching her. Then, very slowly, she reached into her clothing and pulled out a knife. Gogel's eyes widened. Chelsea crouched beside one of the bushes and deliberately hid the blade deep inside the leaves. Then she calmly stood back up, as if nothing happened. Gurgle stared through the window in disbelief. "This doesn't look good," he muttered quietly. First Silas, sneaking through the castle with a mysterious gold key. Now, Chelsea, hiding a knife outside. The entire castle suddenly felt suspicious, dangerous, like hidden plans were moving behind the scenes while everyone focused on the tournament. Gurgel slowly backed away from the window with a worried expression. Maybe wandering through Iredell Castle this morning had been a mistake, because now he had seen things he was never supposed to see.